So I'm willing to bet that you've probably heard this riff before. You have definitely heard this one before. And if you've listened to any country radio in the last 15 years, you've probably heard this one. But I'm willing to bet that you probably don't actually know who played the parts on those songs. And that's because it was played by a small group of session musicians in Nashville, guys like Tom Bukovac, Derek Wells, Rob McNelley, people that you may have never heard of. And those guys right there have probably played on more #1 country singles than just about anybody alive. And thanks to YouTube and some amazing Premier Guitar rig rundowns, we've gotten a sneak peek into the gear that these players use. And I've spent the last couple of years obsessed with this. I've watched these rig rundowns probably in the hundreds of times, and I thought it was about time that I tried to take those learnings and build out a rig in the Fractal FM9 to try to get close to that. So let's give it a shot. So if you take a look at some of these guys' rigs, their pedal boards and their amps, there's a few common elements that we generally see. So starting with the overdrives, we normally see multiple stages of gain. So starting with something like the exotic RC Booster, we can also have the Analog Man King of Tone, the Noble's ODR. Sometimes we'll see a claw, and sometimes we'll see the Ibanez Distortion. That'll feed into some form of an EQ. Normally that is the Boss GE7. And then we see different types of delay and reverb, and then some ability to cover some of the main modulation effects. So vibrato, chorus, tremolo, pitch shift. So that's kind of the starting point that we're gonna go with and what we're gonna try to replicate. Now, in terms of the amps, we're gonna be going for kind of two of the main sounds. So we'll have the 65 Deluxe Reverb as kind of our main sound, and then we'll also have the Matchless C30 on the EF86 channel. If you take a look at Rob McNelley's rig rundown, he's running a 112 car open back cab, I believe. And he says that before he was using that, he was using basically like two 1x12 Deluxe Reverb. So he would have one that was basically like his amp head, and then he would have the other one basically just acting as his cabinet that was getting mic'd up. So we're gonna basically go for like a 1x12 open back cab. Normally those are being mic'd up with an SM57 and a 121. So as we go through the preset build here, you'll see us basically try to replicate that type of cab setting. All right, so we've got our Fractal FM9 edit up. I'm just gonna set up kind of my main blocks here. We'll have our input, obviously. I'm just gonna go ahead and drag in the 3 drive blocks. We are gonna have an EQ block. We're obviously gonna have a single amp, a single cab. I'm also then gonna drop in a few additional effects here. So we know that we're gonna have a delay block. We're also gonna have a reverb block in here. So we'll just go ahead and drop this in. Some form of a trem. So I'm gonna drop a pitch block in here, and then we'll start with that. And that should kind of get us most of the way. So we wanna start with the Deluxe Reverb. So I've gone ahead and pulled that up. In terms of the cabs, I'm gonna use just the legacy cabs. I prefer to use the IRs on this thing. I think they sound really good. So the ones that I think I wanna use for this is gonna be the 1x12 Deluxe Reverb here, which I will find, and we'll pull this up. So we'll have the Deluxe Reverb 1x12 57 on one side, and then we will have on the other side the 1x12 Deluxe Reverb with the 121. I'm just gonna pan these out a little bit. So we're gonna go -25, +25, And then a couple quick adjustments that I like to do. I'll just go ahead and set the low cut to 80 and the high cut down to like 9K, just as a starting point. I like to just throw on like a simple preamp here, so I might just throw on like 2 preamp. We'll throw on a little bit of room here, so no room. And if we bump that up to like 15. It's kind of my starting point, so we'll kind of roll with that. Now, I think what I want is like a little bit more bite out of the amp, so I'm gonna give a little bit more on the input trim here just to push the amp a little bit more. So I'm liking that. I think that feels pretty solid. I like to play around with the negative feedback. I think it kind of helps give a little bit more immediate attack. So I think I like where it's at, but I might bump it up just a little bit. Push that somewhere here. And just to kind of give you the full thing. Again, I'm not running stereo amps here because if you think about how these guys are normally using amps in a studio environment, they're normally plugged into just one amp at a time, and then they might be splitting off into a single cab and then 2 mics, but generally they're not running stereo, so I wanted to try to replicate that here. So let's try to dial in the Matchless, and what we're gonna go for on this one is just a little bit more of like clarity, hi-fi sound. So we've got the EF86, I've got no high cut, the tone is kind of right at noon. Let's see, I've got the negative feedback, so I think it's in a decent spot here. So let's see where this is. That's Matchless, back to the Deluxe. Matchless. Our overdrive, again, RC Booster, so no overdrive. RC Booster. We've got Tone of King set up. Let's see how this thing sounds. All right, so I want to throw a little bit more drive on that. We'll bump the output a little bit. Then I'm just gonna go ahead and dial in the EQ. I'm gonna choose the constant EQ. And I'm just gonna bump the 800 and then the 1600 a little bit. So no EQ. let's get the reverb here dialed in, and I'm just gonna go for a spring reverb. So studio spring. It's a lot. Let's back that off quite a bit. Bump it up just a hair. Yeah, I like that. And then for delay, we're just gonna do a mono tape, and we're gonna try to make this more of a slapback. So I'm gonna set it to like 130 milliseconds. Tremolo, I'm not going to go too crazy on this, but we might just want to include something here that's time synced. So I've heard Tom Bukovac and Rob McNelley both kind of go after this type of sound. I think it works pretty well for like more atmospheric type stuff, but I've used the virtual capo, which tracks really well on the FM9. And they kind of do something a little bit more along the lines of something like this. So it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. So I'm going to go for a pretty interesting fuzz sound here. Bring the level down. A little bit of slapback, and it might be something like this. If you take a listen to Rob McNelley's rig rundown, you probably hear something like that. He does some really cool stuff with the fuzz pedal that I try to recreate. So I think that gets kind of in the ballpark. If you go back to our clean sound, we've got our Deluxe reverb. We've got our first stage drive, which is the RC Booster. We've got the King of Tone. We could push that a little bit more with the GE7. We could kind of go for our like Americana type sound with the tremolo. We've got our slapback. And then our last sound here, which is kind of that gated fuzz sound. So I think that's kind of it. Hopefully that gives a little bit of a starting point for how you can get kind of the Nashville sound with just a few simple effects on the FM9. So I guess the only thing left to do is to put this thing to the test in a real track and see how it sounds. So let me know what you guys think. What does it nail? What's it missing? What would you change?